Good morning. For the record, my name is Kriscinda Hansen. I am the CFO for the Gambling Commission. And I'm just waiting for my presentation to load. There we go. Thank you. So this presentation will be a budget update as well as our fiscal year 25 supplemental budget request. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, this is our gross gambling receipts reported over time. I did present this same chart at the May commission meeting. We will have our next set of updated numbers at the August commission meeting. The quarter two quarterly licensing report is due July 31st. So just a reminder that the quarter one of 2024 is the first significant increase that we've seen in gross gambling receipt reporting in the last 2 years. So that was very good to see, and it was actually what the licensees had indicated to us, is that quarter one is often their historically their strongest quarter in terms of gambling activity. So hopefully in quarter two we see those numbers still hold a sustained increase over past years. So next slide, please. So our revenue summary, this is through May 31st because state accounting is still open for June. So we had originally expected to have $16 million in revenue at the end of May, and we had $15.25 million. So a variance of about $850,000. So as a reminder, that variance is largely due to two factors. When the fee increase was effective last year, I was still really new to the Gambling Commission when we were doing all that work. And when I made our revenue projections, I had made the assumption that the fee increase would be for all licensees when it went into effect. After I did all of our work, I learned that those fee increases are rolled out as licenses renew. So because of that, the fee increase only applied to those that renewed in July 1 of last year and then moving forward. So the increase in our revenue has ramped up over time rather than realizing an increase all at once. And then additionally, when I was working revenue projections for this original report that was a year ago, I used a 3% increase in gross gambling receipts because that's what we had seen historically. And in 2023, we just did not see a 3% increase. It was actually rather flat and matched what the numbers were in 2022. So the combination of those two factors accounts for quite a bit of the variance that we're seeing between the allotted and actual. And that's evidenced by the fact that in February when I reported, our variance was 1.79 million. And then in May when I reported, which was the close of the quarter one, our variance was 1 million. And now we're at 840,000. So as we see more of our licensees paying under the update, the fee increase, we're coming closer to what we expected to see for revenue overall. Next slide, please. So our expenditures through May 31st, when we did our original allotments, we expected that our expenditures would be about 18 million. Our actual expenditures are 14.7 million. A large part of that variance continues to be our staffing vacancies. And then another part of that is also because our IT modernization project has not moved as quickly as we originally anticipated. So both the contracts and the goods and services had expenditures in there for our IT modernization project that we just haven't incurred yet, both buying software and hiring contractors to help implement for that project. The equipment variance that we see is not because we didn't try and buy our equipment, it's because we still continue to see issues with supply chain for our equipment. Example, we ordered some vehicles last October or November, and they were never delivered. We had to cancel that order. We re-procured from someone else and have since received our vehicles, but it's still very challenging to find some of our equipment. And on top of that, it's just more expensive, of course. So next slide, please. So our supplemental budget request is $1.78 million. The amount you see in the first column is the budget as approved by the commissioners last July when I presented the biennial budget. The numbers you're seeing here do not include the IT modernization because we don't need a supplemental request for that because that spending has already been approved and we have money set aside. So this so that I can compare apples to apples and go back a slide. Thank you. I wanted to make sure that what I was displaying for the approved budget and the supplemental budget were on par with what was originally requested. So that's why it doesn't include IT modernization. The personnel supplemental request is two things. One, I learned after last July that the statewide system that I use to calculate what our salaries are going to be does not automatically apply the 3% increase to any of our agent positions, although it does for the rest of our staff. So that request was not included in our budget request last year, even though it's legislatively mandated. So we've included it here. The second part is that we are wanting to double fill some positions for people that are have indicated that they would like to retire, and we want to make sure that we have time to have knowledge exchange and make sure that there's business continuity. So that is the personnel line item. In the contracts, there's, as Director Griffin mentioned, we're hiring an outside firm to help recruit for our deputy director. That wasn't in our original request, so that is part of the supplemental request. And then a large part of the supplemental request is also asking for the ability to hire an organizational change management consultant, both to help with our IT modernization and just a lot of the change that we're seeing in the agency overall. Equipment is, we need additional vehicles that we didn't initially identify, and some of our notably IT equipment is just more expensive than it was when we originally submitted our budget. And then lastly, the overhead item for $500,000, that represents the other agencies that we have to pay for services. That represents the increase in billing rates that was approved for them in this legislative session for their supplemental budget request. We don't have an option to pay those bills, so we're asking for the authority from you guys to be able to pay those bills when they come. So next slide. So I've been presenting this projected available fund balance, I think, since the January commission meeting. And so this one takes into consideration if the supplemental budget request is approved. And I've also updated how we're forecasting our revenue. Until recently, we haven't had enough data that didn't have pandemic effects on our revenue to be able to use our historic revenue to project our future revenue. So what I've switched to now is using a rolling 12-month average of our revenue. So every month when our revenue comes in, I adjust this to average our most recent 12 months and update our forecast to see where we are. And so because of that switch, because we have enough data to be comfortable with using that methodology, we do see a more favorable revenue outlook in our projected available fund balance. So if the supplemental budget request is approved and we were fully staffed from July 1, 11 days ago, until June 30 of next year, we anticipate that our available fund balance would be $1.45 million. And just a reminder what available fund balance means. It means, so we have a sizable fund balance because right now we have money set aside for our IT modernization project, include not only just our big piece, but we know we have to replace a couple smaller systems when we phase out our legacy systems. Also, we have money set aside for our records management system project that's happening. And then a security update, a building security update for our Lacey office. So we have all that money set aside in our fund as well as OFM's required working capital balance. So after we consider all that, our projected available fund balance would be $1.45 million. Next slide, please. So after we had some listening sessions in winter with both hearing public feedback and listening to our travel partners, one of the things that was brought up is that even though we need to know what our costs would be at 100% staffing 100% of the time, when people leave, it takes time to fill their position. So what that translates to is approximately an 8 to 10% rolling vacancy rate, just because it takes time to recruit and all that work. So this chart is all the same factors except for applying a 10% vacancy rate. So given consideration to that vacancy rate, we project our available fund balance in June 25 to be $2.58 million. So that is the end of my presentation. If there's any questions?
I have one question.
Yeah.
For the gross gambling receipts from the Q1 of 2024, is that similar to pre-pandemic, or is it more or less? Do you know? About the same.
I know it's more, and the one thing I can say is it's really challenging to compare because there was a phase-in period, and so 2019 was the first full year that was the 2019 fiscal year, so July 1 was the first time that all the licensees were reporting under that new model. So by the time we didn't even get a full year of data before pandemic.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So I could go back and look at Q1 of 2019 and see how much, what the difference is. But I do know that this is greater than 2019. I just don't know the exact.
Okay, then that's fine. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, is there any public comments? None. All right. We have.
I move to approve the FY25 supplemental budget request as presented by staff.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. Thank you, Kriscinda.